My name is Nick. I work on a product called Postmark, or transactional email API. So kind of been in email for a while and be talking to you about the modern email experience, some things you can get out of email that you might not be getting. So first off, everyone kind of needs email, even if your app doesn't, at least all web applications kind of. Even if you're just sending like a password reset email, your users really need that when they need that. Some applications send a lot more email. Some applications only send a little. But chances are, even if you just send a little, like those are probably really important. Like I said, I've been working on Postmark for a little over 3 years now. And email is really, really hard and complex. But we'll be talking about some of the cool things about it tonight. So I'm going to try to focus on things you can do with email, that you can hook into email in your application that you might not know can be easy to do. So we're going to start off just talking about like webhooks in general, in case everyone's not familiar with that. And then we're going to talk about what you can do with email bounces, what you can do with inbound email, and what you can do about email opens. And we're also going to talk about some of like the privacy stuff, because email can get a little creepy. It's something very personal. So I work for Postmark, so I'm going to use that as like the example that I'm going to default to. But all the providers are awesome, and like the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, like they're applicable to everyone. So I think even if you use Mailgun or SES or Mandrill, I think this talk will still be applicable. But I'll probably say Postmark a lot, but I mean all the email infrastructure providers. So the first thing is webhooks. I find webhooks surprisingly hard to explain. I think everyone kind of gets the idea of like an API. So if your application is in blue, you're talking to your provider's servers, you're posting emails, and you're getting stats over HTTP. So webhooks, it's kind of, that flips around. So basically, you're hosting an API for Postmark to contact and things like that. So we're going to be posting data to you. And you kind of get to define the URL, but we define the payload, the actual data that goes in. So why would you want to use webhooks? It's kind of the best way for someone to tell you about updates for your application. The alternatives are kind of polling. So polling would be like you check the API, you check the API, you check the API. Oh, something's there. OK, you got it. And like, we don't like that because you're using our API a lot and you're not getting any value of it. And hopefully, like that's kind of like boring code to write. Like, oh, if your code is down, then you miss an update, and it's just generally not good. So with webhooks, you can kind of get the update as it happens, right when it happens, and you don't have to write any code that's doing nothing. And another piece that webhooks is great for is kind of like you can do whatever you want with it. And we don't have to build a feature for everyone. That's kind of like a little secret in that, if you contact us and say like, oh, we want to do like X, Y, and Z with this. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome. Here's a webhook. You can build it yourself. And so it kind of like, really opens up the ability to do whatever you want with the data. So a provider isn't doing something that you want it to do, like you can make it happen on your end. So what are we actually sending to you? And we'll go over this. But it's going to be a bunch of JSON that we post over HTTP to you. JSON is the universal language. Well, it's kind of the lowest common denominator. JSON is fine. It's got types like string and numbers. That's about it. So everyone in general has, or all languages make it pretty easy to work with JSON. So that's what at least our webhooks use. So hopefully you'll be able to integrate with our webhooks really easily. You're not going to get fancy types or schema to match against, but it's JSON. A really cool tool that you can use for webhooks is called request bin. It kind of generates like a random URL, and it'll show you the JSON that gets posted to that and all the headers and stuff like that. So if you're working with a provider and testing something out, request bin is like a really cool free service that can help you, iterate faster. Little segue about webhooks. Postmark, we're kind of like medium scale. We send a couple million webhooks a day. If you're working on an app that is sending webhooks out, a couple things that you might want to think about is like cascading downtime will affect you. So like we're not hosted on AWS, but during the AWS S3 outage, like a lot of our customers were down. So if we're sending webhooks to a lot of our customers, they were all down and like queues were backing up, and so a lot of things were delayed, even though it wasn't like our app wasn't down and hosted on S3, but like everyone else was. So how we handle that at our medium scale is just kind of like over provisioning in the general case. We have a couple services that just have like a bunch of threads, and try to get like throughput like that, which works well in most cases. If we were at like Google scale, we would probably do something really fancy, but for right now, we just do over provisioning. The other thing that we do is exponential retrying. So that way, you could think about it, if we try to send you data and your API is down, we could try again immediately 10 times. But chances are, if your API was down the first time, it's probably down 3 seconds later. So what we do is that we save the data, we retry again in 1 minute, and then we'll retry in 2 minutes, then we'll retry in 5 minutes. And hopefully after an hour or 6 hours, your API is up and you do get the data eventually. But yeah, so kind of that's a technique that we use, exponential retrying times. So that way, we're not, we've done this to some of our smaller customers if they've had a lot of data queued up. We basically like DDoS them. So you don't want to do that to your customers.
When do you give up?
I think we retry for 6 hours is our longest time frame. And then there's like 10 steps to that. The other thing you have to keep in mind is like TLS stuff can be tricky. Jake knows all about that. So we're basically sending data to a bunch of different APIs, all hosted by developers. So like depending on what language or framework you're using, if like the ciphers, and you have to handle all the different ciphers and TLS versions and stuff like that. So that can get a bit annoying. We use .NET for most of our background services. So for some reason, TLS 1.2 isn't like enabled by default. You have to specifically enable it, and then like mess with the registry to get all the different ciphers and stuff supported. So that was a bit annoying. So if you're running webhooks, TLS stuff can be kind of tricky to handle. So the first thing that we're going to talk about integrating with your app is email bounces. So what is a bounce? So a bounce is when the email that you tried to send couldn't get delivered. It could have been for a ton of different reasons, but the end result in the user you were trying to contact was not contacted. Given that that's probably like the main method of communication with your user, that's probably not a good thing, and you probably want to know about that. So when we handle bounces for you, what are we doing? So when an email gets sent out, there's a header called the return path. So what happens there is that you send an email to Gmail, but you send an email to like foo@gmail.com, and foo doesn't exist. So what happens is Gmail is going to look at that email and say like, oh, foo doesn't exist. I've got to let someone know about it. So look at the return path, and they send an email to that address, and that email is the bounce. So what Postmark does is we have mail servers at our address that are collecting all the emails that are coming in. That's the bounce information. We process them, and then instead of you having to deal with, parsing the email parts and finding out what's wrong with it and stuff like that, we send a webhook to your servers with the JSON body of all the bounce and all its parts broken up. thought I have the JSON body later. So what can you do with this type of information? There's a few cool things that you can integrate into your app. So like, why would you want it as like a webhook? You know, you would want to like act on it and do something with it. So a flow that almost all web apps have is kind of like inviting a user to your account. So what happens if you mistype that email address and mess it up? And you know, so in case the person doesn't like wait 6 hours and tell you, hey, I never got the invite, you know, maybe the email is delayed or whatever. But if you mistyped it, they're never going to get it. So this is what we do in the Postmark web app is we let you know right away, like, oh, this email bounced. Like, the user is never going to see that. Like, you probably need to check out the email address. And so if you click into it, we give like the exact reason why the email doesn't exist. So in this case, you know, no one here at wildbit.com doesn't exist, and this is the exact message that Gmail gave us. So here's the actual JSON payload that we're going to give you for bounces. So we're going to break it all up, and this is what we're going to give you. To call out a few things, the first one is the type of bounce that it is. There's kind of like a loose industry category of bounces between like hard bounces, spam complaint, and soft bounces. So a hard bounce means that it didn't get delivered. This is a permanent error. Like if you try it again, it's going to be the same thing. It ain't going to happen. So that could be like a lot of time like, oh, the user doesn't exist, things like that. A spam complaint is when the user has specifically like clicked spam on it, and so that's not good, and you probably want to know about it. The third one is soft bounce, and there's kind of like a lot of general categories to it, and it's basically like a catch-all for like everything else that could happen. Like the user's mailbox could be full. There could have been like DNS problems. There could have been like you know, the attachment was too large. A lot of the things. Generally, soft bounce means that if you tried it again, it might work. But basically, it's a non-permanent error. Next piece that we provide is message ID. So this is kind of like a Postmark-specific concept, but a lot of the other providers. So what this does, it links you back to the original sent email. So if you're keeping track of like what emails are going out, and you're keeping a list of those IDs, you know, okay, so you're able to know specifically, oh, the password reset email that I sent out bounced, and that's how you're able to link it up. Obviously, the email address of the user is important to get at. And this is another semi-specific Postmark concept, is the ability to activate an address. So what we do at Postmark and what other providers do as well is if an email address hard bounces or there's a spam complaint, we deactivate the address for you. So that means if you try to send to it again, it ain't going to work. We're going to block it at our API level. So this protects both us and you. So it protects us in that it hurts our IP and sending reputation if we send to a bunch of Gmail addresses that don't exist. And then Gmail is going to just like block us entirely. So we want to stop that. And we also want to protect you so that you're not trying to send a bunch of emails, spending a bunch of money trying to send to email addresses that don't exist. So for hard bounces, let's say like user just set up their new domain, they didn't put in the MX records the right way, you can reactivate it and say like, no, this address is cool now. For a spam complaint, we say like, no, you can't reactivate it. The user doesn't want to hear from you anymore. You know, they're breaking up with you. So that's kind of the differentiation between these two fields. And obviously, we provide like the description and details that the remote mail server gave us for the exact reason why the email bounced. And so they're kind of like an art to read sometimes to determine the reason, but we give it to you so you can handle it. Another reason that you might want bounces as webhooks is to keep track of your deliverability. So this is a case of a user that I think I think it was like a spam. They were sending some spam and stuff. So most of the time, if you get a spike of bounces for deliverability reasons, it it could be a couple different reasons. So one, it could be the provider's fault that one of our IPs got on a spam block list somewhere, and we're getting blocked, and your emails aren't getting delivered. So you might want to know about that. But there are a few cases that could be specific to just you that you might want to, that you can handle on your own. So I've seen a case where a company was using a separate unique domain for their static assets for their images and CSS and stuff like that. And that domain got on a spam blocking list. So we were getting a bunch of bounces for their emails, and it wasn't coming up on our radar because it's just limited to their own account. But yeah, they were getting blocked a lot. Another thing, depending on where your users are, that can happen is just tangentially, it seems like in the US, a lot of people use major providers like Yahoo, Gmail, Outlook, things like that. But we have a few customers that are primarily in Europe, so they might focus on, they might be in Denmark or in the Netherlands, in Sweden, where there's a bunch of smaller ISPs that people seem to get their email addresses from. So what can happen is one of those smaller ISPs might start blocking your emails. And so that's the type of thing where, as a percentage-wise on our side, we're not going to notice that. But for your customers, it might be 20% of your emails now getting bounces. So that's the type of thing that if you're using a bounce hook and keeping track of those stats, you can immediately get aware of, oh, wow, we're seeing a big spike in bounces. We should look into that. Another deliverability segue. So one of the funny things that we found in dealing with a lot of these smaller ISPs is to just complain on Twitter, and they get back to us right away. So this is Dana, our head of support, just reaches out on Twitter, and she gets contacted back right away and resolves the problem. You would think that somewhere on their website would be information, but no, their websites are all terrible. So we just yell on Twitter, and we're able to get, we've gotten, it's been actually really great responses in order to get emails unblocked. So another reason why you might want to get bounces is as a quality indicator. So at Postmark, we send out emails. People are constantly trying to sign up and send spam emails. So we obviously do not want to allow that. And one of the easiest things that we did was say oh, the email address that you signed up for, your account bounced. It isn't real. Well, that's a big indicator in our system that, hey, this guy might not be legit. So depending on the industry that you're in, this is tracking your sign-up bounces might be an easy way to detect fraud. So that's something that we've done. Next is inbound. So inbound, you can kind of think of it as an email interface to your application. So we do a lot of the heavy lifting in order to accept emails, parse them, break them apart, and give it to you in nice and easy JSON to deal with. So you can provide an interface to your application that different types of users can use. So what are we doing here? So you can set up, what most people do is they set up a subdomain, and the MX records point to us, point to Postmark. And so we run the mail servers, we process the email as it comes in, and we send you the email as JSON data. So kind of the prototypical examples are help desk software and project management tools, and kind of also sales software Salesforce or HubSpot and things like that. So what these are, it's they're all very heavy email applications, and so so any type of back and forth conversation, you don't want to be parsing SMTP emails all the time. You can use an inbound product. Basically, any kind of product that has a reply above this line to add the comment, that's using some type of inbound processing. Kind of a more novel example of inbound is our DMARC tool. So anyone wants to talk DMARC afterwards, I'm down. But in general, what DMARC does is that you set up a DNS record for your domain, and then email providers like Gmail and Yahoo will send you reports on what IP addresses are sending from those domains. So it's it's a tool primarily used to prevent like spoofing. So if someone's trying to pretend that they're your domain or that they're PayPal and sending bad emails and stuff like that. So how they send those reports is that they email you gzipped XML files, and that's how they do the reporting. So obviously that is not ideal to handle and read, but we made a free tool for people to use at dmarc.postmarkup.com, and what that does is, so we were able to basically build it like fairly quickly using inbound, so that we get all those reports as JSON data, and it makes it really easy to work with, to combine and concatenate, and yeah, we're able to build a little side tool using our own inbound processing because DMARC sends the reports by email. So what is the actual payload that we're going to give you? So here it is, an email in JSON format. So the first is who the email is to. You can take a note at the mailbox hash there. So that's an example of like plus addressing, you might know it as. It's kind of like an easy way to throw IDs or other identifiable information that you need to hook up to your own application into an email address. The bread and butter is the text body and the HTML body, what's actually in the email. So you don't have to parse it, we just give it to you as JSON values. And the last one are attachments. So again, JSON being the format, we have to convert binary formats into ASCII, so we base 64 encode the content, which can be kind of a hassle to deal with, but that's the only way we're able to represent like PDFs or images in binary type formats in JSON. So, but we base 64 them and we send it to you in JSON. So hopefully, it's relatively easy for your application to work with, at least much easier than hosting your own mail servers and parsing email files. So in general, to offer like a complete interface to your application via email, like a help desk software or a project management tool, it is kind of like a lot of work. It is another interface to completely maintain and things like that, so you need to consider your audience. As a developer, me personally, I'm more than happy if I get a comment notification to click through and open up the web app. But for other types of, depending on who your users are, they might feel more comfortable working with email. So depending on how comfortable they are working with email, you can provide that interface. And if you're using an inbound product, that the provider does all the heavy lifting of parsing the email and you just have to handle the JSON, that can work out well. So next thing we're going to talk about is opens. So I think the general case for using some type of open tracking information for your emails is the same reason you use Google Analytics for your website. You kind of want to get like basic stats. You're sending emails out into the void and you don't know if anyone's looking at them, you don't know what's going on, and you kind of just want to get like the feedback, oh, people are like opening my stuff and reading them, it's cool. The other type of information you get is you kind of get what email clients are people using, where they're opening them. They can help you make important decisions like, oh, like 80% of our users are opening up their emails on mobile. Like maybe we should like make a mobile site instead of forcing people to the desktop and things like that. Kind of a cool example of using open data like inside your application itself, not just for overall stats, is from Help Scout. So Help Scout is the help desk software. I don't know how many of you all do support sometimes, but there's kind of that feeling of anxiety when you send a response to an urgent ticket, like, oh, did they get it? Did they read it? Like, I don't know if they're gonna, like, should I send a follow-up? So Help Scout, they use open tracking, and they just like pop this thing in saying like, oh, the customer looked at it at this time, like, and so kind of takes the anxiety out of the situation and let them know like, all right, it's in their hands now. I don't have to worry about it. And so this is like a great use of open tracking that's kind of like built into the application and not for like general stats. Another example that starts to get into like the creepy realm, and we're going to talk about that, is from Campaign Monitor. So Campaign Monitor, you send newsletters out, and so they have this feature where, you know, when you send a newsletter out, they give you this map, and you see, oh, like Buzz from California opened the email, and Ross in Stockholm opened the email, and you kind of see it as it happens, and so it's neat and it's fun to see like, hey, like people are, you know, you just announced that new feature and everyone's opening it and interacting with it. So it's like cool and fun and exciting there. But you know, the fact that they show like name and picture, you know, it starts to get in the kind of like creepy realm. So with open tracking, what is the provider doing? You know, what are we doing for you? So in your HTML emails, we put a little 1x1 tracking pixel in there. And so when the email gets opened, you know, the email client makes a request to our servers. And we do a little custom logic like slowly feeding out the image so that way we get like the read times. So we know like, oh, this person only looked at it for like 1 second, or like the person kept the email open for 20 seconds, things like that. So we process all that. And again, and then we post the opens to your server, so you're able to get that information and updates. Excuse me. So here's the JSON data. This is how we break apart the open information. So we give you the platform, whether they opened it up on the web or desktop or mobile. Like I said, we do the read seconds. This one kind of has like a semi-questionable value. Like for a password reset email, like it's kind of worthless because like people are gonna open up the email and click the link, and you know they don't need to read it for 10 minutes. But if you're sending more like educational info in an email, you know, then it might be useful to say like, oh, like no one is like, they might open it but then immediately close it, and so you can kind of rethink your putting a bunch of educational information in an email. You know, might not be the best place for it. And yeah, so we give you the message ID and the recipient, so that way you know who opened the email. And then I skipped this one. We also give you, like, based off of the IP address, we try to look at, you know, geographic information, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Yeah, so email tracking in general. So it gets a little creepy with user agents and IP addresses, and you know, I think, you know, in this day and age, you know, you can kind of do a lot with that information. It's a little creepy. So like I said, like in the JSON payload here, our QA tester lives in Novi Sad, Serbia, so that's why this geographic information is in our examples and docs and stuff like that. But yeah, I even felt like I had to like mask the IP address just in case like that isn't like his apartment's IP address or something like that. So yeah, so what can we do about it? So Postmark is a platform, and it's hard because we legitimately want to make our customers as powerful as possible, as awesome as possible. We have the data, you know, and we kind of trust that, like, you want to use the data to build cool stuff and to do the right thing. And if you want to make something awesome, that'd be great, right? And we want to help you do that. And so that's what we build things for. You know, we hope that our customers use the platform in the right way. But people don't always use the platform for good. So I could theoretically say that, yeah, like the ability to target Facebook ads by race is a good idea, but it's kind of might not be. You might want to think a little bit more about, you know, what we're building as a product. This came up over the weekend that I thought was interesting. You know, like everybody loves to hate on the Uber CEO and like all the crappy things that he's doing. But then, you know, you kind of realize like, yeah, like he wasn't the only one doing those things. Like there are engineers at Google or at Uber and Google probably that were asked to do these things and they did them. So as like an engineering culture, you know, we need to think about what you're doing. I think it's a little common in tech to say like, yeah, if I'm writing like Haskell and Kubernetes, then like that's all I care about. I don't care what the product is. But you know, I think some people do care about the product that they're building, and you know, we should think about it and think about you know the type of values that you support and what you want to build. So back to email tracking. So how do people and clients and stuff combat that? So the first one is like just blocking images straight up. This is pretty ineffective as far as I know. Like it's effective in that it blocks the tracking pixels, but it's going to block all the other images too. And most people are, as far as I know, there's no email clients that say like, unblock like this one and this one, but not like the rest of them, or only block like one by one images and stuff like that. So I think most of the time people are just going to click enable images, and that's going to enable all the images, so you're going to get tracked. So it's kind of like the classic security problem of like ease of use versus security. And I think blocking images is kind of, it's going to fight the ease of use a little bit too much. So Gmail actually does pretty good in this regard. So what they do, if you didn't know, every email that you get through Gmail, the images get rewritten to go through their image proxy. So when you get an open event in Gmail, we know the user agent reports itself as Gmail, so they don't get like your user agent info. The third party doesn't get your user agent info. Google gets everything. But if you're using Gmail, in for penny, in for pound. And the other thing that they don't get is your IP address. So I think in this case, like we know we do get an IP address, but we know that it's Google servers, so we just strip out the geographic information entirely. So Gmail actually does like pretty good in this regard. I know like people, when they first announced like their image proxy service, you know, people were kind of concerned about that. But in this case, like it does what it was designed to do. It blocks sending that type of information to third-party people that embed any kind of tracking info in their emails. So what can you do in general? So if you're viewing your email in a browser, you can use any type of like your browser plugins that block different type of ad trackers and stuff like that. As far as I know, I'm not sure how many of the default like lists, if you install AdBlock or whatever, actually include blocking from kind of like the standard like email tracking services. But if you're using a browser, you can add stuff to those lists and things like that. If you're using an email client, you probably have a lot less control over what you can do about that, aside from always blocking images and things like that. I'm sure Thunderbird probably has some decent controls. If you use an email client like Nihilus, it's really customizable and you can add plugins and things like that. Finally, do not track. So if you don't know, like do not track is kind of like a header that browsers support, and kind of like ad tracking services and stuff can honor it if they decide to. And it's basically the idea that if you have do not track enabled, you don't capture the IP address and other types of like identifiable information and like resell that and things like that. I haven't really thought about this until I like pitched this talk, and Sam kind of like built up like the concept of the talk together, and I got to thinking about it and it's like, okay, what can I do and things like that. And so as soon as we get through some reliability issues at Postmark, we're going. I consider like an important thing for us to support Do Not Track. So that's something I'm gonna be working on, and maybe come back in a little bit and tell you all about how it went. So yeah, that's my talk. Any questions?
When you said that you were sort of slow loading an image to tell how long the user
Yeah.
reading it, I didn't understand how that actually works.
Sure. Yeah. So we use 3-1 redirects. So yeah.
How many redirects it goes through?
Yeah. So how?
Basically like an infinite set of redirects.
I think we stop after like
600 or something.
Yeah, we stop after a certain amount, but yeah, but the basic idea is like, okay, if the client is still requesting the image, they still have it open,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So the do not track thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, that has value for just about everybody in an ad context.
Right.
But I would think that if someone is paying you
Right.
to send transactional emails, that there's already a relationship between the sender and the sendee
Right.
recipient.
Yeah. So that is a good question. So I think that's why, like, for our use case, hopefully people, there is a relationship type there, but I think the general concept behind Do Not Track is that if like that flag is set, then we should respect that user's preferences in order to that. And so I've been looking into the specification, and I need to like read up on it more, because it does specify between like first party and third party things. And so that's why like it's kind of not like a thing to do in a weekend. Like I want to really read up on it and understand it. But yeah, my understanding would be like, so I think for our use case, the implementation would be along the lines of, we would do basically what like Gmail does, where we would strip out like, the actual end IP address of the user, like we wouldn't pass that along, and we could strip out, maybe user agent info and things like that.
And another point on that is that it's only going to apply to browser users.
Yep.
So
That is true. Actually, Thunderbird has Do Not Track support in the email client.
Really?
Yeah. So hopefully other email clients will support that. And that's the other thing. It's like, okay, we're only going to help some people, but it is something that we can do.
I
Yeah.
guess all I'm saying is I think that a good argument can be made that this isn't what Do Not Track was built for.
I agree, but I think I think Do Not Track was primarily built for like tracking on the web and stuff like that. But I think email tracking is also an issue as well.
I can think of a use case. Like, let's say you wanted to, I don't know, attack somebody on the internet, so you could.
Look, I'm not saying you can't make an argument for it. Obviously, Nick has been thinking about arguments for it. I'm just saying that if I'm paying you dollars to send transactional emails to
Right.
specific people, then that's theoretically not a spam situation, unless
Right.
unless I have I'm using like stolen credit card numbers or something.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of spam,
Mm-hmm.
what how good of a reputation do you guys keep with the spam trackers?
We try to keep a really, really great reputation. So like, yeah, one of our things is that we only send transactional email. So like everyone has to go in and get approved, and we don't allow, so they have to we approve every account. We only allow like one-to-one. We don't allow like marketing emails. So like our delivery, so if you want,
What are you saying that has to be approved?
like any account that signs up with us, we approve them.
The sender.
Yeah, we approve the sender, and yeah, we think we have pretty good spam rates. We also track on our status site like deliverability times for each provider.
So
I don't know how to get that.
let's quantify this.
Yeah.
Let's assume that a good non-spam customer of yours, what kind of delivery rate can they expect spam?
Like a percentage of emails that get delivered.
Yeah.
Um,
Not including bounces and, you know.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
What percentage, you know, would a good
So
marketer expect to see?
Dana is saying 100.
100. If you're sending normal content, like welcome emails, password reset
Right.
emails, your important emails that your application are sending, if you send through Postmark, 100% of your emails will reach the inbox.
Okay.
And so I'll tell you like what we get alerted on. Like, so if you have more than like a 0.01% spam complaint rate, like we get notified and we're going to contact you about it. If your bounces are over like 10%, we're definitely going to contact you about it and things like that. Trying to, I don't know how to move a thing to the other screen. All right, let's try. Yeah, so this is our status site where we keep deliverability times and stuff like that to all the major providers. So we tell you that, so we use some third-party monitoring tools to keep track of our delivery rates, and we also give you like average delivery times or actual delivery times to providers and stuff like that.
That's seconds?
Yep.
4 seconds.
Yeah, so what this test does is like we have tests at every minute or so. We send an email, and then we have stuff set up via IMAP to like look at the email like when it comes into the inbox. And so, yeah, Hotmail sucks.
I don't know if you can talk about it on purpose, but also the delivery webhook that we have.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Forgot about it?